Good morning to a man who has heard a much better version of that song than I was able to provide. Ian Cover, good morning.
You had 43 years to get that right.
Yeah. You've obviously not heard the rest of the show this morning. It's been a complete and utter debacle from the time I pressed the button.
Good morning to you. Thank you. Happy 200th program.
That's very, very
to
kind.
You both, and I'm most embarrassed that I've arrived without bearing a card or flowers or gifts or an invoice. Exactly right.
As you did last time. Well, we're going to be a little self-indulgent for 10 minutes, if that's okay.
Right.
And then after we've been self-indulgent for 10 minutes, we're going to talk to one of your mates as well. We're going to bring him in on the conversation for 20 minutes. His name is Ross Stevenson.
Yes, well, we were here for your 100th show.
You were indeed.
It's more than 2 years ago then, because
you're
not on every week, are you?
So it was, I think, in May 2 years ago, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just seems like last week.
It does, doesn't it? That's what happens when you get
the
to
worst
this
thing
age.
about it.
All right, let's have a crack at this. I went out and spoke to a few of our favourite guests over the journey, and this is what we got. None of them played this. I dubbed this in.
Oh, yeah. You're getting warmed up.
I did say self-indulge, but there was one or two there that, we had Keith Potka writing songs for us. We had Brendan Mason giving us a no. It's all go.
And Cove, was interesting that you've probably seen, spoken to, performed with quite a few of those.
Yeah, have met a few, been fortunate, written stories about them back in my old showbiz writing days. And yeah, one of the career highlights, I was doing a gig one night. Normie Rowe was there to provide the dance music at the end of the night. It was a 75th birthday, so the crowd had grown up with Normie, so to speak. And it took a break, and at half time he says, "Yeah, what's your song?" I said, "What do you mean your song?" He said, "Oh, you got to do one." So next thing, he said, "Second song in the next bracket," and he gets me up and I'm singing with Normie Rowe.
That's impressive.
Doing Johnny Be Good.
Well, it's a bit it's a bit like performing with Rob Cameron, isn't it?
We're
going to have a song while you get our next guest on the phone, because otherwise we're still chatting. I reckon he'll know this song, the bloke we're about to ring. It is 10:15. We're going to fade Colleen out because, again, for the second time I've chosen the wrong version. I'm not doing too well this morning. It's not a really good event. 18 minutes past 10 o'clock, we have got a special guest on the phone who is on borrowed time, not because he's not looking well, just because he's got other activities he needs to be doing. Ross Stevenson, good morning, and thanks for being part of the 200th show.
Well, my pleasure. Congratulations to you both. Well deserved.
Thank you very much. I was trying to bring Day by Day as the introduction. I chose the wrong version again. I've done that 3 times this morning.
Well, that'll no doubt show up in the reduction in my royalty checks.
Yeah, correct. We're halving the amount we're paying you for this morning. Now, before we get started on other matters, I do want to take a serious moment, if I can. We are in the presence, Rob, of Radio Royalty, both of whom have worked closely with a man we lost about a week ago. His name was John Blackman. Ian, Ross, your memories of working with Blackers?
Good morning, Ross.
I didn't ever work with him, but I knew him quite well, and he was in constant contact during a radio program in 3AW with our audio master, Damien Tardio. Blackers would be texting him all the time, but I remember him most of that. We'll let Kobe speak because he would know him better. As a consumer, as a watcher of Hey Hey It's Saturday, with remarks, and we've all locked them away, Kobe, but do remember him saying once that he'd been to the doctor during the week, and the doctor said, "What's the problem?" And he said, "Well, sometimes I think I'm a wigwam, and sometimes I think I'm a teepee." The doctor said, "That's your problem, you're 210.
Yes, and thank you for mentioning the fact he texted in without saying how annoying it is to have people texting you during a radio program.
Yes, I first went to Melbourne from Geelong to write about showbiz. I just touched on in 1982. And I was given the radio beat to write about, and we just started the Could Have Beens in 81, so this was a further entree into radio for me. And I decided to write a series on the breakfast announcers, and I went and sat in at every breakfast show, and I sat in with John Blackman and Uncle Roy at AW, and stayed for the whole show, and then went to had a cup of tea, and was completely, besotted by it all. And later used to hang around a bit and have drinks on a Friday night with Blackman. And I remember one of those days, you'd appreciate this, Ross, at the end of the day you go, "You know what, one day we'll do a radio show together." and a few years later, after he'd left AW for the ill-fated CBC experiment at the old 3AK, he rang me up and he said, "This is serious. You know how we'd always said we should do a radio show together. Would you like to come and join me at the then Greater 3UZ?" And that was my first foray into full-time radio in 1987. I did 404 mornings with John. It was one more
204 to go.
one more morning than Kevin Bartlett played games. And so he used to start at 5:30. He needed a half an hour to get himself going. Then I'd come in at 6. And, it was a great opportunity. We had a lot of fun. And you sat... it was very hard to concentrate on the job because you were so focused on what a technician and craftsman he was, putting it all together and pressing buttons and pointing to the booth and all. Incredible. So it was a great opportunity. Did that, I'd say, for 404 mornings, 87 to 89. And John was very good to me, both professionally and personally. And hadn't seen enough of him in recent years. Used to see him a lot of charity golf days. I think John Anderson told that story on air the other morning, Ross. About
which one was that?
Oh, he was playing with Blackman one day on one of those golf days, and Blackman said, "Oh, McGain's, it's fantastic." He said, "I got this video of Jack Nicklaus, and I really worked on my game from it." So they stand on the first tee at Royal Melbourne, and Blackman hits it about 15 metres into the scrub on the left, and he turns around and he said to Ando, "That Jack Nicklaus is a fraud."
Ian, I'm glad to hear that you started at 6 o'clock.
Yes.
Because, of course, our friend Sam Pang, when he was doing breakfast on FM radio, he started at 7. I interviewed him once ahead of his hosting of the Logies, and I said, "I feel very honoured for you to be here, Sam. You didn't get up this early for your own breakfast program."
I'm going back, I reckon, to 2009, 2008, somewhere around about there. My daughter was involved in Auskick and was invited into a show that was on 3AW at the time called Glossing Over, hosted by Dr. Turf, Trevor Marmalade and Tony Leonard. And there was a young fella running around in the booth doing the production on that day, and his name was Sam Pang. And I thought, what a lovely young man he was. And look where he's gone to.
He's outstripped us all. He's hosted the Logies. I mean, you got it made in Australia if you've hosted the Logies. Although Wendy Harmer may care to differ.
It was unfortunate. Rob was hosting the Border Leicester annual dinner that night. Otherwise, we would have been hosting it, and Sam got the gig as a result.
Ross, can I just put something to you? Matters arising from the week. I've just made some notes here.
He has too. Trust me, he's got notes in front of him.
Talking of radio and some of the great new innovations and you had one on yesterday with the World Cup of ABBA.
Yes, indeed.
And it got down to the final two.
Please explain how this works.
Please explain, Ross, just for Rob, how it works.
What you do is you run a listener, the listeners ring in on a poll, and what you do is you conduct a World Cup. So you get a field of about 8, and then you have, so that's 4 games, and that results in 4 ABBA songs being left, and 2 go up against each other, which leaves 2, and they go up against each other in the World Cup final of ABBA songs. And all you ask on the occasions you ask the audience, for example, is Knowing Me, Knowing You, a better song than SOS? Vote now, and you leave the lines open for about 10, and you get down.
Can I just jump in here, Ross, and put it to Rob and Neil and ask them? Neil might have been listening. Were you listening?
I heard the early part of it, but
right.
Of course, that's once I'm back in the listening zone for 94.7 The Pulse, I turn across.
Well, I'm going to put it here. What do you think made the final of the ABBA World Cup? What was it?
I know what won it.
Oh, you know what won it, Rob?
Yeah, I would have had Knowing Me, Knowing You, and I was a bit of a Rock Me fan, but it wouldn't have even made the top 8. So
no, it wasn't in the 8.
Yeah, Mamma Mia, I suppose. No?
No, well, Ross, it came down to?
It came down between Dancing Queen and SOS because 100% I was personally shattered when Knowing Me, Knowing You was beaten in the semi-final because I think it's the best ABBA song and by many tunnels of fencing.
Well, I was going to say I reckon it should have been, in fact I was surprised there wasn't the protest siren going off. I thought clearly Dancing Queen and Mamma Mia in the ABBA canon are the Bone Crusher and Our Waverley Star. And I did. In the end, it was no Cox Plate. Come on, Ross.
Covey, which of the two would have raced its way into Scandinavian?
But you see, there's a bit of a common theme here that with that and the 2023 Grand Final. The popular vote won it, but the better team on the day ran runners-up because SOS is streets ahead of anything else that ABBA ever produced.
Right. Anyway, they are geniuses. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I quite liked Fernando. I remember it popped onto the scene and was number one within 3 hours. It was crazy.
Yeah,
that was part of one of the best advertising campaigns I can ever remember. On the back, the Herald Sun took out a full page of they didn't, obviously the client did, the full back page, and the slogan was, "If I had to do it all again, I would, my friend, for Nando's." Every time I hit the song now, I can't get past that.
Can I go back to an earlier remark of Ian? I think you said you started in radio in 1981, and in 1982 you started reviewing radio. Were you able to give yourself a glowing review?
Oh yeah, look. Once you've written about you've been in radio for 5 minutes, you become an expert. So no. Okay, I never worked in any plugs for us at all. Not that Rupert knew about anyway.
Interesting question, because we've had 200 cracks at it, and I'm not sure we've got it right. You two have both done a lot. Do you still know what good radio is? Ross, everyone reckons you do it best. Do you know a plan? Did someone strategise with you, or do you just make it up as you go along?
No, we just make it up as we go.
Yeah, same here.
We don't have a meeting until we're there for half an hour. So there's no preparation. I always think the only thing I ever think of is I think of it as a train, and it's got to be moving, trying to be moving all the time. That's the only sense I have in my mind. The rest of it, you just you make it up as you go along.
I think we and not for a moment am I trying to compare, but I have a running sheet that I sometimes remember to bring with me, which I didn't this morning. But we know what the 6 segments are, and inside that, make it up as you go along. Obviously, you guys have got a structure in both your programs in terms of how it hangs together without being fixed.
Yeah, well, I'll jump in there. That's what I always say to people. The same thing. They say, "Oh, gee, how much is that scripted?" I say, "Oh, every bit of it." What do you mean? I start working on Tuesday, have Monday off, and they work a bit. And I say, it's like this. It's like your segments, like you have segments, and the AW Breakfast has segments. And I say it's like pre-dinner drinks, nibbles, entree, main course, dessert, and then the cheese and bickies. And if you are going to someone's place for dinner, you don't get sent the script of what you're going to talk about in between all those courses. Yeah. It's what you then talk around the courses, which makes the program. But you got to keep moving along. You don't want to get bogged down. Not like Ross. Have you heard anything worse than people that play 10-minute tributes to themselves?
Which I'm not going to name names, but one person was actually asked to provide said audio and refused to do so.
Well,
at least you participated.
I wasn't going to be part of that
charade.
I had another matter arising too, Ross.
No, he was going to say something nice. Before you get matters, you going to say something nice, Ross, weren't you?
No.
I was going to say matters arising this week because you had placed a great story in the last couple of days about it's 60 years since the Beatles were in Melbourne.
Yes. And
some astonishing calls from people who said they were there. I was waiting for Damien to play, I'm 97, because some woman said she was there and she was in her 20s. I thought, gosh, she must be 89. Yeah. So anyway...
Rob's children went to school with her.
Oh, right. And then on the way home last night, I was listening to The Pulse around about after
As
midnight.
You would.
And there was Lauren or some sort of thing like that. I'm half asleep. And she was playing Beatles tracks, but recorded by other people, Beatles covers.
Right, yeah.
And there was a fantastic one of Hey Jude. Can you find the playlist from last night, Neil? Because I rang the station and it rang out.
Yes.
Don't tell me it was a pre-recorded program.
Oh, we don't do that.
No.
I'm just trying to find out who it was that you were trying to... I can't imagine who it must have been. We'll find out and let you know.
So, Ross, 60 years of Beatles. We talked about ABBA. ABBA probably had a bit of influence on the music industry, not so much as Beatles. What's your favourite Beatles song?
I would say I think while my guitar gently weeps, does that generally sort of get singled? Don't George Harrison songs sort of get singled out as being sort of at the very top?
Yeah, we've had discussions on here. We think that he is probably been underdone for many, many years with the Lennon-McCartney phenomenon. But you look at the body of work of Harrison.
Luke Power syndrome.
Yeah.
He's
turn
the Zeppo Marx of the Beatles. The lesser-known brother.
The Luke Power, yeah. It's extraordinary. My favourite by some distance is Something.
Mm.
Yeah, well, that often gets mentioned as being near the top. And as luck would have it, of course, the two bands that were going head-to-head in the 1960s, I am leaving in approximately 1 week to go and see the other band play in the United States. And so they are still going after 62 years.
You actually saw them in Hyde Park recently, didn't you?
I did a couple of years ago, and I thought, this is a fanciful dream of mine. It turns 81 on the 26th of July this year, which is the opening day of the Paris Olympics. Now, I know they would be celebrating all things French. Might there possibly be a French version of Start Me Up? Would that
well, there's a chance that Mick went out with a French model at some stage. You know? That might make it relevant.
Oh, we're talking about the Rolling Stones?
Oh, yeah.
I thought you were talking about the Animals, because they're coming to Geelong next month.
Are they?
Yeah.
Well, Greg Wells, who played footy for Geelong, was a celebrated cricketer in Geelong, and was the runner for Malcolm Blight.
He certainly was.
Was his nickname ever Wellesley?
Every chance.
Yeah, I would have thought.
I think Greg Wells, he's seen the Rolling Stones 20, 30, 40 sort of times. He's seen them all over the... When they were in Australia, he went to every show for years and stuff. Yeah, you ought to get him to talk about it. Ross, you should get Greg Wells on your radio show, or even for private discussions for when you go to see them in America.
Did Greg Wells... Was there a Greg Wells who played for Melbourne?
Yes, and Carlton. Yeah, different Greg Wells.
Different Greg Wells. Greg Wells I'm talking about is the brother of Geelong's recruiting guru, Stephen Wells.
Oh, that's right. And how is... There was some player that was going to sign for the Cats that was spoken of as the next big thing. Like, he might have been a large lad. How's he going?
Oh, that was before Stephen. That was back in the 80s. Was Ramsey Begonovich. Hey, and then Bobby was very excited about Bobby Dave was very excited about Ramsey. He actually, someone from the football club, I was the footy writer for that. They brought him into the office to show him to me, not to the interview. Just look at this big fella, and then and of course it wasn't long before I think they went on World of Sport with that great Jack Dyerism, Ross.
Sorry, I just had a child shout playing Fortnite.
They went with that great Jack Dyerism about Ramsey. Looks like Tarzan. Plays like.
Ramsey's very famous name reminds me of a name of another player, Cove, you'd remember. He played a little bit with Hawthorn and Geelong. I think he's got the most fascinating name in football. Rochford Devonish Mears. How good is that?
Yes, it is good.
He wouldn't have been bullied at school.
If you want to go to a good bookshop and ask to get a copy of the Could Have Been Champions, Half a Chicken and Chips...
Have that on the shelf.
Features 50 interviews with footballers, including Rochford Devonish Mears. There you go. I'm just lapsing into a bit of Warren Smith there. I can't help it. I'm sorry. Anyway, that were my matters arising. So,
Ross, where are the Rolling Stones playing?
They've been on tour for a couple of months now in the States. I'm going to go and see them in Chicago, which is a city that not enough Australians visit when they go to America. I reckon Chicago's an American city that's most like Melbourne.
Yep.
Well, they always say Boston is.
Yeah, that's another one. Yeah.
Boston a bit, but Melbourne looks more like it, and it's the middle of summer, and it'll be about 30 degrees, I think.
So Melbourne looks more like it. Does that mean it's got lots of graffiti, does it?
and a hell of a train line that runs between two suburb neighbours I was going to travel along. Right, now, Ross, I do need to cut this off because you need to be somewhere.
Well,
Cove's staying, but...
Am I?
Yeah, well, it doesn't have to, but Ross has a reunion to get to.
Oh, this is the footy reunion.
Well, there's only 6 of us, but I came up during the week and said, well, let's go and see. The team that we used to play for, University Reds, played in F grade in the amateurs. They, in the meantime, thanks largely to Dyson or Lacey, they transmogrified into the Fitzroy Reds.
Go Lions.
Well, the Fitzroy Reds are currently in A grade.
Yeah.
At the university, they are playing University Blues. So we are going to load up at Jimmy Watson's and wander up, have a look at the game, and when it dawns on us that you're not allowed to drink during an game, we'll lose interest and wander off it.
So this is at the old Brunswick Street ground, isn't it?
No, that's the Reds used to play. This is, and they still play.
Yeah.
This is Uni Blues home ground, so it's at the university.
At the university.
There'll be a former CEO of the AFL at the other end of the ground hurling abuse at you, will there?
He could be there. I read in the Financial Review this morning that he's taken up a small posting with a merchant bank, so I'll be asking him about that. But I could relive the days of our coach, the Frensham, and I don't care what anyone says. He invented all of these. Pair up in threes. Mm-hmm. At training one night, he said, "Over here, fellas, under the lights, we're warmer." Football's a simple game. It's not rocket surgery.
Yep.
And one night at training ended early when he asked us to line up alphabetically in order of hot.
and if we can indulge you for one more minute too, from your celebrated amateur career, Ross, without wanting to ruin your live act, although you don't roll it out very often. Weren't you at a game one day and you're wandering around watching the reserve and you got chatting to a chap standing there watching the reserves?
We were playing Coolaroo Rovers, who were new to the competition.
Hope your car was locked.
And we didn't know what to expect. So I was given the task of going over to speak with their senior coach on the boundary line during the reserves game. And I got talking to him eventually. I said, "What do you do for a living?" He said, "I'm a social worker." And I said, "Well, I said to myself, that's a promising start. If there's anything softer than a university student, it's probably a social worker." I said, where do you apply your trade? He said, "At Pentridge Prison." And I said, "And what do you do there?" He said, "I prepare long-term hardened criminals for their release back into society." And I said, "How do you do that?" He said, "By getting them to play for this football." And without a word of a lie, they were in the competition for 1 year before they booted out. They played Peninsula, Old Peninsula Grammarians, and at the conclusion of the games, when the Old Peninsula Grammarians went back to their room, filed into their rooms, they were surprised that Coolaroo had followed them in.
For a little bit more.
Yes.
A little bit off the ball action.
A little bit of argy-bargy.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Well, Ross, thank you for being part of our 200 shows and our 200th show. Apologies for indulging the bloke who texts you every morning with suggestions on how to do your program better. We hope to keep in touch and have you back soon.
Congratulations to you both. Well done.
Thanks, Good on you, Ross. Best wishes.
All the best.
That is, of course, Ross Stevenson. Do we want to have a song just while we hang up and then collect our thoughts and come back?
We do. There's a couple of comments I'd like to make off here.
I will play this song. It's called Singing My Lines by No Promises. It's a new release. Have a crack at this.
Oh, I'm still here.
That is No Promises, with a bit of an up yours to the Australian music industry. Janine has got a bit grumpy in her time as a muso, saying just because we don't have a massive budget doesn't mean we shouldn't be heard by the radio. Now, we should actually just acknowledge a few texts before we go back to you, Ian. Greg Wells is also a very good VFA player for Geelong West in their great era.
And at Ocean Grove as well.
That's Shane. Very rude of me not to mention congratulations 200 shows. And I for one miss Rob's footy commentaries. He makes more sense than others. Geez, that's a low bar to be working against, isn't it?
Well, at least you know who Jackson Payne is.
Yeah, that's right. Does that drive you nuts? And a bit of trivia from Steve. The Animals haven't got Eric Burden out front, correct? John Steele is still banging the drums, and hopefully he will be a guest on our show next week. That'd be a bit of a get. Someone who's been playing the drums since 1964, he must be really tired. And Ramsey Burgodonovich, whose name I can't say, Burgonovich, drove a Fiat 1283P, a tiny car for a tapeworm to drive.
He wouldn't have fitted in it.
Well, I'm just quoting it.
Wow.
Oh, that's what I'm doing. That other voice that you're not recognising, you will recognise as Ian Cover, who has joined us for our show today. We were talking before that with Ross about amateur football.
Yeah.
And did you want to relay any other stories?
No, well, there was one
I think we've
interesting
moved
one.
on.
Yeah, okay, no, I wasn't sure. There was,
But we might leave it because there has a few allegedlys in there.
okay, no, well, that's all right. No, I just wasn't sure whether you wanted to. Tell you what, I was thinking, Ian and also Ross when he was here, you guys started pretty much doing what we were doing, only a whole lot better, clearly. These days, radio and the people that they recruit into radio, if you haven't played 200 games of AFL football or haven't been an alleged comedian on stage, you don't get a run. What happened? Where did that start?
I'm
getting all serious and philosophical now.
Yeah, I came in here to have a light, bright
Oh, well, that's okay.
hour with you, and suddenly we're doing a seminar now on the future of radio. Where to now?
Yeah.
The great training grounds were, and I hopefully still are, public radio like this. There's still plenty of that happening at Triple R, for example, in Melbourne. It happens here. And the other great training ground was the ABC. I mean, and the best callers on any sport, that's our sort of area, are people that started on the ABC and were trained. And you're right. Just because someone played 200 games, and you get the impression that the powers that be, and they know who they are, they sign up someone who's played footy, put them on there, and then don't tell them how to do the job. Because they think it might be feeling, this person's a star. I can't tell him or her what to do. But and the standout, I'm completely biased, but the standout caller for me at the minute on the footy on 7 is Alistair Nicholson.
Yeah.
Yes.
And most people don't know who he is because he didn't play footy. But he did work at the ABC.
Yeah.
And terrific caller. Great identification, doesn't say too much, doesn't overwhelm you with stats.
Yeah.
And did you know, this is something I just picked up recently, Mark Blitzos was he a steeplechaser? And was on the eve of, was he on the cusp of going to the Olympics?
Apparently so, yeah.
And Scott Pendlebury?
Play basketball, apparently.
Who told you that?
Yeah, I picked it up the other night. Someone might have mentioned it.
And apparently Lincoln McCarthy and Lockie Neal were good mates back in South Australia. That
Were
got
they?
mentioned the odd time.
Goodness me. So that's how I see it. And people got trained up. I mean, Max Walker, he had a fabulous cricket career, and he went to the ABC. And Max actually used to talk about how he sat next to Alan McGilvray, but as well as that, Jimmy Maxwell. They actually they helped him when to speak, get in and out, all that sort of stuff.
Just on that same theme, my greatest early memories of the great Dennis Cometti were calling cricket on the ABC. He was a brilliant cricket commentator.
Correct. Yeah.
And not many would realise that. It's all the latter stuff. But he obviously got good grounding in how to do it properly.
Yeah. Trained broadcaster. Sometimes there are exceptions. We've had no training at all, but we've trained ourselves up.
That's right.
At Triple R.
And clearly, there are things that we say that we've picked up from others who do know what they're talking about, and I assume you do the same thing along the way. You don't even realise you're doing it.
Well, I think that's one of the great things you could do is actually listen. Not necessarily yourself, but to other people. Just listen to radio and you pick a...
Having said that, I recently had the privilege of conducting a session at the Introduction to Radio course here, which is a bit of a joke in itself. But
Gee, can we go to that, Neil?
That's right,
it is good fun.
You've heard the expression, don't do what I do what I say.
And that's what I say at the start of every one of them. But the key thing is, for me, is to listen and respect your audience, understand what you would like to listen to. But you also, as much as it sounds a bit vain, you do have to listen back to yourself if you're going to improve, because you think, oh, did I really say that? Oh, I wouldn't say that. You just have to do it. And I'm sure all the good ones have done plenty of that.
Yeah. And there's stuff about content, but there's also stuff about the craft, like, getting the time calls right and back announcing records so you know who the singer was, I'm still trying to find out who it was that sang that country song as I was driving in. You both said,
Josh Turner.
Was it?
Josh Turner.
Did you say that at the time?
No, we didn't.
We say it about most weeks.
Because he's been embedded into the soul of this show so deeply, we just presume everyone knows who it is.
That's why I needed to find out who sang that version of Hey Jude last night. If you looked that up, who was on?
I promise I'll find out for you.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, because I don't have it in front of me.
What hour of the day was that, roughly?
About midnight.
In that case, it may well have been someone external to this station.
Yeah,
right. What do you mean? They broadcast them out in Market Street, do they?
With their badge upon their chest,
coming from Tamworth, I would imagine.
No, it was great. Anyway, and
there was an album brought out years and years and years ago. George Martin before he passed away, obviously, got together a whole stack of people to do Beatles songs. I know Jim Carrey did I'm the Walrus or something like that. Really weird combination, so it may have been from that album. I'll check it out, though. I'll find out and let you know.
Yeah, because it had a couple of usual suspects, like Elvis. You know. Elvis does a great version of something. You were talking about that before.
Yeah. Have you heard Paul McCartney and Eric Clapton's version where they start on ukuleles?
Oh, really?
On the Concert for George album, they did when George Harrison passed away. They did a tribute, and Paul McCartney tells the story. In fact, I saw him recently at Marvel, and he started off exactly the same. When I say I saw him, so did 75,000 others.
From the tribute you played earlier, you've clearly had just about everyone in Australia on this program in the 200 editions. Have you ever had John Waters on?
No.
Because that was one of the versions last night. Was John Waters singing?
It'd be a Lennon song.
Yeah, it was, Strawberry Fields. Would that be right?
Could be. Because he used to do a show, a live show.
Through the Looking
Glass.
Looking through a glass onion.
That's it, yeah.
Looking through a glass
Well,
onion.
there's something. We had him on the Could Have Been, so it's time you had him on.
Yeah. Well, you got his phone number. We'll bring him on.
He might be doing another Beatles type show coming up.
He's doing a show coming up. It's been advertised on the radio. It guarantees to scare you beyond your
with,
wits.
With Ewan McGregor, not Ewan
what's
McGregor,
that
the other
about?
McGregor.
I don't know.
When I've drifted off listening to public radio, such as 94.7 The Pulse, which you're listening to now, I have heard on commercial, wash your mouth out, commercial radio, ads for that show. The ad's scary, Neil.
Yeah, absolutely. There are places in and around Geelong where I can't pick up the pulse.
Yes.
And so my radio, in that circumstance, to support Ross in his career, I sometimes listen to him in the morning just to, he encourages us and we encourage him. And so I've heard it on there in his breakfast program sometimes.
I saw John Waters interviewed this week, and I'm trying desperately to claw into the back blocks of my mind and get the name of the show, and I can't. But and there's a young fella McGregor who cut his trade in Home and Away. Or
Luke
something.
McGregor?
No, not Luke. No, not Luke.
That sort of diminishes the horror factor. Luke is an actor that you may have seen.
Yes.
Cove, just on talents, and I wanted to ask Ross about the great John Clark, and we were talking about the Blackman, the sharp mind. Yours is particularly good. That's one of the treats of Could Have Beens, being able to just produce something really relevant at the spur of the moment. Is that just an inherent skill of yours, or have you had to follow and
quite possibly
people?
But it gets back to listening.
Listening.
If you listen to what people say, there's an opportunity you can make a smart remark.
Correct.
Right. Sorry?
Correct. No, it's exactly right. But it's an important part of making that show work, because it just keeps everything sharp and clear, and I quite love it. And Blackman, obviously, for the hey stuff, just extraordinary.
Yeah. No, John had a sharp and could come up with his own funny lines, right? And lots of them. But he also had this fantastic memory bank of one-liners as well. So he could pull out one that was appropriate for a situation if he didn't have his own spontaneous line. So he could do them both, and make it sound like his own.
And I must admit, although he does do the dad jokes far too often, the bloke to my immediate left is not too bad at pulling out a something from the past.
You're very kind.
I just on talking about this is one of the things, is getting older, and people you work with. In the last week, John Blackman passed away, and it was who I worked very closely with. But one of the great things about radio, when we started, John was very good to me. I said how he gave me a break to talk on the wireless for the first time in a full-time gig out of newspapers. And we had a young panel operator. He was 18, just starting out, and he went on to went to Warrnambool. He did breakfast at 3YB, named Evan Broadway, and he later went to WO's running an actual station over there, 6IX or something. Yeah. And so he rang me the other day on the news of Blackman's passing, and we had a good old catch-up. And it's one of the great things, whatever line of work, whether it can be radio or it can be any job you're in, you can be a teacher and you catch up with some old mate from that, and it's just like you're back in the studio, you're back in the staff room at school, So we had a good old chinwag, and he told me he got my number. He thought he had it, and he got my number because he plays golf on a weekly basis in Perth with Rodney Malcolm Hogg. Oh. And he said, you ever played golf with Hoggy? This is a former Australian fast bowler for the listeners. And fast bowlers, we know, they're just a little bit different. I think Hoggy was going back to his mark one day, and he said to the bowler, how many? To the umpire, how many? The umpire said 3. Hoggy said, what, I've had 3 or I've got 3 to count? So he said, have you ever played golf with Hoggy? I said, yeah. He said, It's interesting. He said, "Oh yeah, gee, it's hard work. You know, you say something." He said, "Hoggy doesn't talk. You know, and you have to shut up because he's concentrating. And if you get within about 40 metres of him when he's putting, he tells you to get out of his eyesight. And all this. He is different, Hoggy.
He is different.
So that was great. Caught up with my man Evan Broadway.
Hoggy's a very good speaker too. He had the privilege of listening to one night at the Redpath Society with Little Geelong Cricket Club Coterie Group, and David Kelly was able to get some amazing speakers, and Hoggy was one who started off the night telling everyone about the 41 wickets at
12.85. If Hoggy didn't turn up and I was hosting, I could have done his routine. I'd heard it that many times.
But then, after he got through that, he then just took the P155 out of himself all night. It's just hilarious, brilliant,
and he does
brilliant performance.
And you're not sure whether he's serious or joking because he does it with his straight face. Yeah. And it was the same. He's scary too. He could be in that show with John Morton.
He could.
Which I have. It's come back to me.
Oh yes.
The show is called The Woman in Black. Described as the most brilliantly effective spine chiller you will ever encounter, if memory serves me correctly.
I'll get him on. I want to hear about it.
We need to say good day to a couple of people who are listening too. Shane says all the best for all the same reason Ian said about Nico. He didn't play at the elite, but studied the game and players. And Loretta. We better say nice things about Loretta. She's the lady who lets us stay here. Congrats, blokes. I think you're having a bit too much fun with Cove.
Oh, there you go. Well, we'll back off a bit.
Yeah, that's right. Yes,
I'll give you a couple of quick serious ones on that about just last week. I want to mention this on air because Lost Blackman and then Ross Booth, who used to call the footy on the
VFA,
on the ABC TV and stuff. We had Ross on our show a bit over the years talking about the VFA and the VFL. And Ross was a gun amateur footballer. Played 100 games exactly with Monash Blues, won a best and fairest, and played 100 games exactly with Uni Blacks and won a best and fairest. I think he probably played for Victoria. Terrific fella.
Yeah, he was good.
I was going to say he wasn't much of a gun footballer if he played for Monash, but he went to Melbourne, he was all right.
And then, we once did the footy marathon on Channel 7, could have been.
Yes.
There have been years of Peter Landy or Sandy Roberts just going into a studio and saying, let's go now to the last quarter of the 1966 grand. They record all the top and tails and put it on for the night.
Wasn't that live? Didn't they stay up on that?
Well, we did. We got invited to do the footy marathon, and by Gordon Bennett, who was the executive producer of Sport at Channel 7. Wonderful man, Gordon. Took a bit of a shine to us. And we said, we want to do it live. I said, what? I said, live. And so we actually went into the ratings. We started at 11 o'clock, so we got 1 hour of ratings. And then we went from 12 till 8 a.m. when they crossed to the North Melbourne breakfast. 9 hours, live. And they got a fellow who had been the inaugural producer and creator of Night Moves with Lee Simon, named Andrew McVitie. He was he was down there for 30 years. And he said, we'll get Andrew McVitie to produce the show for you. And we worked with him on one show, has so much fun. It's written about in our book, Could Have Been Champions 40 Footy Seasons. And Andrew sadly passed away last week as well, suddenly. And he'd been unwell, had a short illness. And we did one show with him, and that's like 1987 or something, but you became great mates out of that forever. I still talk about so many things we did on that one particular footy marathon.
And I must shout out to the great, my very good friend, who'll be no doubt listening this morning, Graham Smokey Dawson.
Good on you, Rod. We do need to go, unfortunately, because if we look next door, the great Tom and the even greater Charlotte are sitting in there chomping on the bit, and they've actually got one bit each, which is pretty handy. Otherwise, it'd get a little bit too intimate for my liking.
Cove, did you know that Tommy Christensen is a holder of the Motuori gift, the 100-metre sprint at the footy club?
Really?
Less than
he's going to give it back to give it back to the winner very soon.
The ground is downhill. So
they couldn't stop him. He ended up just outside Belbray. There are 276 official versions of Hey Jude, so we're not going to go there. We do need to say some thank yous, though. Thank you to the station management who allowed us to do this for 200 shows. Thank you to Sienna and Elise and Grant, who play a very important part in the game, as do Jen and Rebecca and Dione. Digi was in here this morning. We can't do this without the support of some very talented people.
And Barnesy, look where he's finished.
Of course, Barnesy as well, yes. We did mention him earlier. He doesn't get two mentions. We can't do this without the support of some very, very talented people who come along and prop us up. Ian Cover, for one. Ross Stevenson, who's been here today as well. All the guests that we've had, and we had a montage. That'll go onto our website, Ian, in case you want to have a listen again.
I just want to listen back to hear Grace Knight saying it's pretty impressive. I would have thought very impressive would have been the game.